Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to this calling a celebration of the life of John Judge. We don't want to call it a memorial. As part of the local Washington, D.C. contingent, I want to welcome you to Washington, D.C. Many of you come from very far away. Thank you so much for coming. It's great to associate faces with all the names that I've been hearing for years and years. As you know, John died on April 15th, rather ironically, but John died on April 15th of this year, and he died without any biological family. But looking around this room, with close to 200 of you here, I think we can say that John had family. And you're all here, and we're very happy to see all of you here. And particularly, I wanted to welcome you on behalf of Marilyn Tenenoff. Marilyn, John's partner, love, who put so much of herself into organizing this event, and we're very happy that she did through her own grief. Thank you, Marilyn. You know, I knew John really for only about the last dozen years or so. So it's nothing in comparison to many of you who have gone decades back with John, and we have a lot to share. So I used to do work with John around counter-recruitment in the schools, and when he decided he wanted to try to create the Museum of Hidden History, he and Marilyn and I worked together, and that was a great privilege to do that. And I was involved in some other activities, but I learned really when John got sick, you know, I felt that I already knew him. I knew his work pretty well. I felt like I knew him pretty well. And when John got sick, all of a sudden, all these other people, all of you came out of the woodwork to give him support and help and all kinds of things. And like, who are all these people and what are they all talking about? And we're going to find out today. Because it's really impossible to know anybody's life, anyone at all. But John is such a complicated person who is involved in so many things and with so many people that we really had to struggle with how to really talk about somebody like this in the context of doing him a tribute like today. So today we kind of brought together people who knew John in many different phases of his life, from his college years up to the present, his life as a researcher, as an educator, as a public speaker, as a hip-hop lyricist, as an anti-racism activist, and as a radical thinker in the very best sense of the word, as Mr. Judge. So I hope that collectively the stories and the tributes and the poetry and song that you're going to hear today can really help you better understand and appreciate John for who he was and the really truly amazing life that he lived, and an honor that we all felt to know him. So first of all, let's roll off. We'd like to lead off. We're going to hear from Congressman Dennis Kucinich, who I think needs no further introduction. Mr. Kucinich.
Thank you very much. Marilyn, Elizabeth, and I are pleased to be here, not only as friends of John, but as neighbors. I had the privilege of, and Elizabeth and I had the privilege of being able to see John many times a week, as he and Marilyn would drive by our house, which is just a couple doors away. And occasionally, when he had a moment, he'd stop and he would share some of his wisdom at the moment. And when you experience that for years, and then that person who is part of your just almost your everyday life isn't there, it leaves a tremendous void. And I know that's something that all of us share here. And that Marilyn, we're here in support of you as well, because your role in John's life helped him be able to expand his knowledge and share it with so many people. Today, just in the time that we've spent in preparing to start the program and talking to some of the people who are here as friends of John from all over the country, you sense a spirit of revolt. Really, at work, you could feel it. I mean, that's what John represented, right? I mean, here was an exemplar of the words of Dylan Thomas about raging against the dying of the light. And John Judge was a Diogenes-like figure who searched the dark caverns of secrecy, spying, covert wars, and assassinations, looking for an honest representation of what we would consensually affirm as reality. His keen intelligence, his depth of knowledge, his sense of justice made of his life an endless quest for truth. What better place than to do that work than the marble preserve of smoke and mirrors known as Washington, D.C., where our national fabulists spin stories of patriotism, the triumph of democracy, the victory of democratic values, while smashing the very icons they serve to raise up. John Judge was analytical. He was methodical. He was relentless in gathering information which shed light onto one cover-up after another. Just as he was in transition from, or with Cynthia McKinney and then in transition from the staff, this was about the time that I started impeachment. We started to talk about impeachment proceedings. And John and Judge and Mike Smolik, who's here. Mike, where are you? Mike's now teaching in Iowa City. John and Mike came to my office, and they said, you've got to do this. You have to bring an impeachment resolution forward. It's important to the country. It's important to history. And we spent many hours talking about the basis for impeachment. And then after those discussions, right behind them came Dave Swanson. Dave, where are you? David Swanson. And David and I, with the information that we began with John and Mike, we spent weeks building a case and dozens of articles. I had to fight with my own staff over whether to go forward with the resolution. But the resolution, which was brought forward with dozens of articles of impeachment, started with John Judge and Mike Smolik because of John's commitment to the country, because of his commitment to the Constitution, because his commitment to what's right. Now, we've heard his answering machine message, and those of us who are on his email list, and I was checking over this morning, hundreds of emails that I received from John, which I have saved. I feel at some point they'll be put to good use. And he had this sign-off line. By way of this technological simulacrum and wireless wonders, you're hearing from John Judge. Well, let me share with you some words of John's, which are far more eloquent than anything that I can say at this moment, in terms of communicating to us his soul force, his love of country, and his determination to get to truth. I sent John a note about what was happening in the country. This was in 2012, and he sent me a reply, a personal reply. And I can't think of anything better, Marilyn, than to share this with John's friends. The caption was, "Peace depends on all of us." Dear Dennis, peace and the end to terrorism and violence inside and between societies and states depends entirely on the restoration of hope and justice. Without that, no peace can last and no war can end. We exist in a militarized society with a permanent war economy, an agenda bent on geopolitical control of predetermined key resources. Our foreign policy of covert operations, assassinations, coups, overthrows, destabilization, arms trade for the last 50 years has garnered us more enemies than friends. The rise of the military-industrial intelligence, and he puts in parentheses, first draft language, that Eisenhower tried to warn us about, has gone unchallenged. Since 9/11, we've gone into debt spending over $9 trillion on the buildup of military, intelligence, and internal security structure, while all human needs and a workable economy are the last priority. Gary Will's Bomb Power spells out clearly the roots of our current dilemma. The special provisions put in place by Generals Groves and LeMay for the Manhattan Project and the rise of nuclear weapons strategy included the rise of excessive secrecy around government agencies and operations, aggrandizement of the powers of the executive and exclusion of congressional oversight in relation to war planning, and the push for a permanent state of emergency, permanent wars, and doomsday planning for a fortress state and continuity of government. The national security state, wrote John, and its mentality have dominated since the end of World War II to the detriment of democratic process and a free society. It's also treated our history as a commodity to be locked away from the population and beyond review. He concludes by saying, the size, cost, purpose, and use of our military should be public decisions. We need to stop being an empire and to focus on simple defensive measures. Our global role should be more like that of Canada or other progressive countries who assist instead of attacking. We need a national debate about this and a campaign for a democratic military and an end to war, not a militarized democracy, and an end to the Constitution. He signed it J.J. As we gather here this afternoon to celebrate John's life, we do so with the understanding that here was an extraordinary human being, a learned public servant, a humble man whose depth of knowledge and understanding of the workings of government and the society was far beyond most people who served at any level, and we know this about John Judge. So let us this afternoon proceed in a spirit of expanded awareness and consciousness about the life of one person who affected all of us in unique and deep ways. And let's commit ourselves to go forward, individually and collectively, so that the spirit of John Judge can be given an opportunity to merge with the spirit of America and renew our country. Thank you very much.
Crawford, and I'm here from West Virginia with my husband Robin to pay respect to a very dear friend of almost 50 years, along with many other dear friends from the University of Dayton. Many of you here today know John as a dedicated researcher of our country's hidden history. I want to paint a picture of John as an intense young man in 1965, reciting the Jabberwocky and passing out name cards with a picture of Winnie the Pooh. At that time, he always carried a copy of Khalil Gibran's The Prophet and would share its timeless wisdom with whomever would listen to or read with him. On time. you would measure time, the measureless, and the immeasurable. You would adjust your conduct and even direct the course of your spirit according to hours and seasons. Of time you would make a stream, upon whose bank you would sit and watch its flowing. Yet the timeless in you is aware of life's timelessness and knows that yesterday is but today's memory, and tomorrow is today's dream. And that which sings and contemplates in you is still dwelling within the bounds of that first moment which scattered the stars into space. Who among you does not feel that his power to love is boundless? And yet, who does not feel that very love, though boundless, encompassed within the center of his being, and moving not from love thought to love thought, nor from love deeds to other love deeds? And is not time, even as love, undivided and spaceless? But if in your thought you must measure time into seasons, let each season encircle all other seasons. And let today embrace the past with remembrance and the future with longing. Love was John's mantra. Lonely as an only child, he basked in the friendship of his Dayton comrades. But like Gibran, John sought a partner. His first love, Judy, a conservative local gal. His blossoming love in Kathy Enroe, a free spirit who remained his friend forever. And lastly, in his fulfilling love, his soulmate and dream sharer, Marilyn Tannenau. 1,000 thanks to you, dear Marilyn, for truly loving John in sickness and in health, and for bringing all of us together today. On love, edited. When love beckons to you, follow him, though his ways are hard and steep, and when his wings enfold you, yield to him. Though the sword hidden among his pinions may wound you, and when he speaks to you, believe in him. Though his voice may shatter your dreams, as the north wind lays waste the garden. But if in your fear you would seek only love's peace and love's pleasure, then it is better for you that you cover your nakedness and pass out of love's threshing floor into the seasonless world where you shall laugh, but not all your laughter, and weep, but not all your tears. Love gives not but itself, and takes not but from itself. Love possesses not, nor would it be possessed, for love is sufficient unto love. When you love, you should not say, God is in my heart, but rather, I am in the heart of God. And think not you can direct the course of love, for love, if it finds you worthy, directs your course. Love has no other desire but to fulfill itself. But if you love and must needs have desire, let these be your desires: to melt and be like a running brook that sings its melody to the night, to know the pain of too much tenderness, to be wounded by your understanding of love, and to bleed willingly and joyfully, to wake at dawn with a winged heart and give thanks for another day of loving, to rest at the noon hour and meditate love's ecstasy, to return home at eventide with gratitude, and then to sleep with a prayer for the beloved in your heart and a song of praise upon your lips. John, the poet, philosopher, and a bit of a mystic, lived life to the fullest. Some of you might not realize that John could sing and was really a very good dancer, despite his portly size. I'd like to picture him now being greeted by another dear old friend, Anne Wagner, who passed away in her early 30s, feverishly rubbing her hands together, saying, "Where have you been, John?" John will be singing, "Rollin', rollin', rollin' down the river," and dancing his heart out. On death. You would know the secret of death, but how shall you find it unless you seek it in the heart of life? The owl whose night-bound eyes are blind unto the day cannot unveil the mystery of light. If you would indeed behold the spirit of death, open your heart wide unto the body of life. For life and death are one, even as the river and the sea are one. In the depth of your hopes and desires lies your silent knowledge of the beyond. And like seeds dreaming beneath the snow, your heart dreams of spring. Trust the dreams, for in them is hidden the gate to eternity. Your fear of death is but the trembling of the shepherd when he stands before the king, whose hand is to be laid upon him in honor. Is the shepherd not joyful beneath his trembling that he shall wear the mark of the king? Yet is he not more mindful of his trembling? For what is it to die but to stand naked in the wind and to melt into the sun? And what is it to cease breathing but to free the breath from its restless tides, that it may rise and expand and seek God unencumbered? Only when you drink from the river of silence shall you indeed sing. And when you have reached the mountaintop, then you shall begin to climb. And when the earth shall claim your limbs, then shall you truly dance. See you later, Brother John. Glad we got to know you.
Good afternoon, friends.
Good afternoon.
My name is Paul Magno. I've been part of local peace and justice community for nearly 40 years. And to begin with this afternoon, for that community at least, I want to offer to Marilyn and to those closest to John our condolences and our love. John's parting from us came too soon, and it jolted us all. But that sudden loss came hardest of all on you. So our thoughts and our prayers and our gratitude is for you. Back in the mid-'70s when I was in college, just beginning to get my bearings as an activist, John Judge was already a fixture in the local peace community. In fact, to get ready for this afternoon, I asked a few people for recollections of John for today, and each of them had similar things to say. One told me, when I went to work at the Center for CCCO, John was already there. And he tells us that 30 years later, he still explains conscientious objection in the same basic way he learned it from John decades ago. A second person told me, when I was opting to be registration refusal in Cleveland 30 years ago, John came through town and provided a workshop. More than 3 decades since that training, I'm still volunteering with the GI Rights Hotline, and I still utilize what I began learning from John on that day. In the trainings I lead, I will continue to do so. A third person tells us that she got to know John when she drove him from Madison to Iowa City for yet another draft registration workshop. Later, when she moved to the Washington area, she worked alongside John for years. And a fourth tells me that on arriving from Michigan to live in DC, he found that John was one of the most significant and omnipresent personalities in the local movement firmament. So often, as people get ready for their activism, and as people continue their activism, John was already there. He was ahead of all of us. And all of these folks that I've talked about, I like to think of as long-distance activists, people who got involved early in their lives in war and peace questions and have stayed at it for decades. And for every one of them, John was a beacon, not just once along the way, but continuously. He is one of the reasons they continue to trek around the belly of the beast and continue to give it indigestion. Lots of folks will tell you about John's amazing intellect and his mastery of the minutiae of the likes of selective service law, for example. And how else could you be an accomplished conspiracy theorist without retaining a billion factoids and then making the connections between them? Making that ugly world comprehensible allowed John to educate us once again to the difference between credible and important conspiracies and paranoid nonsense. And of course, he was a tireless laborer in the vineyard. A decade ago, some of us were approached to serve on the coordinating board of the Washington Peace Center. The center had been through some hard and controversial times and was down to 3 board members and no permanent staff. John, of course, was one of those 3, holding a tottering community institution together, doubling as its virtual staff to boot. Without John, and those board members and other friends riding out those hard days and welcoming our new cohort of board members, I don't know that the Peace Center would have turned around and would have returned to its vital place in our community. One of the aspects of John that impressed me over the years was his spirit. More than his intellectual hunger and his mad organizing skills that kept him going was his humble, gentle persona. When John brought choices to bear on the DC public schools, It wasn't necessarily due to a high-octane anti-racist analysis, though he wouldn't ignore that, but out of a sense of basic fairness. These were children, and they deserve better than the predatory one-sided pitch the Pentagon offered as they poached our young. John was grounded enough in simply being human to see that and possessed enough of a sense of right and a sense of capacity to do something about it. His spirit was optimistic and joyful, and that should teach us as well. It shows us how to sustain over the long haul, and it's a lot more fun than anger and indignation. John told us that it was a telling statement of bad times when the anarchists were staffing Congress. Of course, he worked for a time for Cynthia McKinney on Capitol Hill. An image that will last with me is this one. Some of us had worked to prepare a group of young people for a direct action at the time to protest stop loss. This was maybe 8 years ago. The idea was that if the soldiers couldn't go home when their enlistment was up, then Congress couldn't go home for Easter either. High school and college students occupied the intersection of First and Independence Avenue at evening rush hour, tying up the hill for over 90 minutes. I looked over to see eastbound traffic stopped cold, and out of the first car in line emerged John Judge, who'd been on his way to the office. For about 10 minutes, he stood next to his car with his hands on his hips, beaming and shaking his head. He was so happy. That's what I'll carry around when I remember John. All his passion, knowledge, and commitment, illuminating the smile on his face and the twinkle in his eye. Thank you, friends.
Terrible. Hello? John. You should be here. You are here. Okay. Yeah, we feel it. Okay. Will do. I love you, buddy. So, I saw the email message about a week ago, and it said, "We've lost John Judge." We haven't lost John. Hell, we're just finding him. I dreamed I saw Joe Hill last night, alive as you or me. Says I, but Joe, you're 10 years dead. I never died, said he. Says Joe, I didn't die. I mean, come on. Have you ever felt John more alive? I love John. I remember the first time I met John. It was September of 2001. And a couple hundred of us came together. I think it was All Souls Church up on 16th Street. It was a Forrest Gump moment for me. Remember the part when Forrest was being chased by those guys in the pickup truck? And he ran through the football field faster than all the players? And the Alabama coach said, "Who in the hell was that?" Except John wasn't dumb. That evening he spoke about blowback. Remember that Chalmers Johnson term, blowback? He said we needed to mobilize and get on the street. But he also said it wouldn't be enough. He said we needed to focus where wars start, in high school cafeterias, where military recruiters convince vulnerable kids to join the military. It was an epiphany for me. He spoke of a poverty draft and starving a wicked war machine of its most vital resource. And he never strayed from his most fervent, nonviolent stance. John's life was an epiphany for all of us. He opened my eyes to the Pentagon's invasion of our high schools, and he taught me how to resist it. He understood the inherently unfair arrangement between recruiter and recruited, especially the psychological training and the advantage recruiters have. I initially saw it in terms of military recruiters lying to my sons and my daughters in high school, in the high school lunchroom. But John helped me to connect the dots. To John, countering military recruitment confronts an ugly mix of a distinctively American brand of institutionalized violence, racism, militarism, nationalism, classism, and sexism. It gets to the root of the problem. Countering recruitment. What a concept. John said it would make me an enemy of the state. We differed on our methods. He had a bottom-up strategy. Mine, top-down. He talked to kids and counseled youth. Tens of thousands of them. We understood each other. He always emphasized how the DoD relies on 4 major programs in the schools. And I believe that he'd want me to talk about that to ensure that his work in this realm continues. Those 4 areas are the JROTC program, the ASVAB testing, the directory information gained through the No Child Left Behind Act, and the access recruiters enjoy in the public schools. So quickly, JROTC is the Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps program. It's a recruiting program that operates in the high schools and teaches 500,000 kids annually military culture and a dangerous reactionary version of U.S. history and government. To give you a sense, the unit on constitutional law in the JROTC civics textbook is entitled, You, the People. John loved that. You, the people? Shut up. Do what I tell you. Gouverneur Morris actually wrote, We, the people. At least that's the way John learned it and lived it. According to the JROTC history textbook in use today in 3,800 high schools across the country, being used by 550,000 children, the United States had to use nuclear weapons against the Japanese to save 1 million lives. And we had to defend American honor when those pesky North Vietnamese opened fire on the USS Maddox. This is what fascism looks like. I'm channeling John. John would say, you didn't think they were just teaching the kids how to march, did you? Ever wonder how Glenn Beck can get a couple 100,000 people on the streets of D.C.? American schools exercise no control over the JROTC curriculum. It's up to you and me to point out the lying liars. The way John saw it, the revolution we engender is at least a generation away. We've got to get into the schools. The DoD funds several programs starting in the elementary schools. The Young Marines program targets kids from 7 up. John pointed out that JROTC instructors don't need college degrees or teacher certification, while all other teachers are routinely expected to have master's degrees. JROTC instructors are the only non-professionals allowed to be in the American classroom without professional supervision. John asked, where are the unions, man? John cited DC school officials who admitted that half of the district's high schools have indoor firing ranges. to accommodate the JROTC marksmanship program. The lead pellets spew deadly particulate matter into the air that circulate throughout the school. The kids track the lead particulate matter throughout the school on their shoes. The ASVAB, or the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, is an even more insidious program. More than 500,000 American high school kids attend school, take a military entrance exam proctored by the DOD, and have all their information sent to military recruiters without parents knowing about it. Maryland and Hawaii prohibit it. 48 states to go. John shared his frustration that 1,000 American high schools are brazen enough to force kids to take the ASVAB without parental consent, and hardly anyone complains. If you want to honor John, look into it and start working legislators and school administrators. So that's JROTC and ASVAB. In 2001, the Bush administration, I think most of you know, codified into law Section 9528 of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. We call it the No Child Left Behind Act. It's a provision that requires high schools to hand over their names, addresses, and phone numbers of all kids if requested by recruiters. You know, most parents are oblivious. They can opt out. All they need to do is fill out a form, hand it in, and their child's name isn't sent to the recruiters. Maryland has a law, it's the only one like it in the country. The opt-out form appears on the emergency contact form. Most everybody in Maryland opts out. 49 states to go. The same legislation, that's Section 9528 of the No Child Left Behind Act, guarantees that military recruiters shall have the same access to high school children as college recruiters. The problem is that in most high schools, college recruiters have to make appointments to see kids one-on-one in the guidance office. Military recruiters chill. They chill in the parking lot. They chill in the lunchroom. It never was a question of equal access. The law was passed based on bogus claims. John would ask, whose schools? There are schools. Whose schools? There are schools. Whose schools? There are schools. Thank you.
This is what we learned when we were in Dallas last November with John. Set to music. Failure at the Bay of Pigs in 1961 was blamed on JFK by right-wing sons of guns, the Joint Chiefs, and the CIA. In the following year proposed to crash a plane to instigate our fear. Then blame it on Castro to invade Cuba again. But JFK said, no way, Jose, and nixed the Northwoods Plan. The Cuban Missile Crisis was in '62. LeMay wanted World War III, but Jack said that won't do. Instead, he said to Khrushchev, let's wind down the Cold War. But the military complex showed JFK the door. J. Edgar's FBI with scant investigation denied bullets did fly from another direction. Magic bullet is a lie, single gunman is a lie. He vowed to exit Vietnam in 1963, but war criminals with napalm would not let that be. Their bullets gave us LBJ and war by fabrication. By their killing JFK, we got escalation. That's why they did it. That was their plan. 2 bullets through JFK killed 2 million in Vietnam. 50,000 soldiers died in the CIA's war. Twice that number of suicides. It's time that we settle the score. The CIA and corporate media together in bed they lay. Mostly hype and propaganda. Can't believe a word they say. Magic bullet is a lie, single gunman is a lie. After the Bay of Pigs, Jack purged the CIA, but he did not purge enough, 'cause they blew him away. Today the drones of the CIA are making enemies galore. If JFK had his way, we would not have endless war. Every president since '63 saw the writing on the wall. They either come from the agency or otherwise they play ball. It's time for us to pay our dues. We can stop the corporate brass. They lie for war, but we can choose, like with Syria, to take a pass. Magic bullet is a lie, single gunman is a lie. A lie, a lie.
Hi, my name's Tim Sharrock, and I think I met John in 1981 in Philadelphia when he gave me a book of his Jonestown research. And I got to know him when he moved back to DC after that. And when he was talking about CCCO, what is it, the Central Committee of Conscientious Objectors, it's important to remember John always used to laughingly call it coward. We always like that. I was a draft resistor, even though I don't look like it, but he meant a lot to me back then. Anyway, this is one of the songs that I used to sing with him. And I remember singing this on a porch in Adams Morgan on a hot summer night, sometime in the 80s. And it kind of goes to how he lived his life. There's no place in this world where I'll belong when I'm gone. And I won't know the right from the wrong when I'm gone. And you won't find me singing on this song when I'm gone. So I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. And I won't feel the flowing of the time when I'm gone. All the pleasures of love will not be mine when I'm gone. My pen won't pour a lyric line when I'm gone. So I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. And I won't breathe the brandy air when I'm gone. And I can't even worry about my cares when I'm gone. Won't be asked to do my share when I'm gone. So I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. And I won't be running from the rain when I'm gone. And I can't even suffer from the pain when I'm gone. Can't say who's to praise and who's to blame when I'm gone. So I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. Won't see the golden of the sun when I'm gone. And the evenings and the mornings will be one when I'm gone. Can't be singing louder than the guns when I'm gone. So I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. All my days won't be dances of delight when I'm gone. And the sands will be shifting from my sight when I'm gone. Can't add my name into the fight when I'm gone. So I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. And I won't be laughing at the lies when I'm gone. And I can't question how or when or why when I'm gone. Can't live proud enough to die when I'm gone. So I guess I'll have to do it. I guess I'll have to do it. I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. John Judge Presente!
It is good to be here. I am grateful for the honor of sharing this remembrance with all of you. My name is Dave Ratcliffe. I teach piano in Boston. The complete text and references for these remarks is at radical.org. That's with a T, not a D. And I'm most grateful for Marilyn for putting all this together. I'm going to speak about a significant period in John's life that involved his efforts to carry on the work of his dear friend Mae Brussell. For more than 25 years, Mae Brussell was America's foremost researcher into the hidden history of war, political assassinations, covert operations, and espionage, terrorism and mind control, secret societies, banking and organized crime, and the origins and rise of international fascism. She held the George Seldes Award for 1987 from the Society of Journalists and was listed in the International Who's Who of Intellectuals in 1983. May authored many articles and had a weekly radio show, World Watchers International, that ran for 851 weeks in California stations in Carmel and Pacific Grove for a total of 17 years of newscasting. She lectured at various universities on the subject of political assassinations, their interlocking links, the causes, and the people behind the murders. She was among the first researchers to connect the murders of John and Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and others, relying on her exhaustive cross-reference index of Warren Commission evidence and a steady diet of 15 daily newspapers, 150 monthly periodicals, and some 1,000 books a year. I met John in 1987 through Tom Davis. I was living in Santa Cruz, and for some years had been listening to World Watchers. Tom was another first-generation assassination researcher and a friend of May's who ran Tom Davis Books and provided May with all her book purchases. Tom told me about the work John had been doing and gave me printed copy of some of his writings and his address. I corresponded with John and saw him in Santa Cruz when he was in the area speaking. In June 1988, May Brussel was diagnosed with cancer, which became terminal. John wrote a proposal in September that was an outline for a May Brussel Library and Research Center that included 4 sections: purpose, functions and services, income generation, and basic structure requirements. May accepted John's proposal and asked him to make it so. John moved to Santa Cruz from DC with the help of Bill Kelly and threw himself into this endeavor with all his passion, drive, and savvy. Although the challenges were immense, John intended to leverage what May had studied and amassed over 25 years and create a self-supporting research center. It is noteworthy that in John's proposal, 3 of the 4 similar libraries in other topic areas he cited still exist: Data Center in Oakland, Edgar Case Association for Research and Enlightenment in Newport News, and Highlander Center in Tennessee. Initially, John set up the center under the umbrella of Downwinders, Preston Truman's established nonprofit. There were many processes John was endeavoring to establish in parallel as well as lay the groundwork for. One was a flyer mailed out to many introducing the center and its goals. Another was creating and publishing a newsletter to further help raise income. An outline for the first newsletter lists a superset of content from what was later published. In a February 1992 letter to both the MBRC and his own conspiracy mailing lists, John wrote that May Brussel designated me to set up the research center in her name in Santa Cruz because we had worked together as researchers for close to 16 years, and she trusted my judgment and knowledge. Unfortunately, May made no provisions in her will or any financial planning for this continued work. With publication of the first 20-page newsletter in late summer 1989, John believed that the organization had turned the corner financially. Tragically, it was at this point that the rug began to be pulled out from under him by individuals who did not want him to run the center. One of May's daughters felt the collection should have been put in her care and moved to force John from the organization. A fellow researcher gave in to personal jealousy and professional envy at John's being chosen by May to be the director of promoting and furthering her life's work, and began making baseless public attacks on John's integrity, agent baiting, and claims that he had stolen money, as well as ridiculous charges including supposed links to the Charles Manson family, the Aryan Brotherhood, and Western goals, all of them fascist intelligence operations that John helped May expose. Since the fall of 1988, I had volunteered in various capacities to help John get the center established. The work was demanding, and as time passed, I was more and more aware of how John was not receiving essential support and help from a number of May's friends and followers who did not agree with May's decision to entrust her work to John. In a February 1990 letter of resignation, I wrote, "John alone took on the fundamental financial responsibility of launching this project, and without his own initial seed money and non-interest loans, it would not have come this far. May trusted John's judgment enough to leave her work in his care with the goal of establishing a research organization and directing its course. John's experience and background in studying and chronicling the story of how fascism came to America made him a viable and credible choice for May to entrust her life's work to. However, lack of support for John, including theft of center materials which were never returned as they were promised to be, unjustified rejection of Wendy Govier, who offered a tremendous array of news media resources and MBRC access to such media, as well as a prior history of substantial support for the center's goals, and a desire by board members to have control of the center's charter and direction without an accompanying acceptance of the responsibilities and duties inherent with such authority, all demonstrate a violation of May's trust in John to continue and further her own work. John eventually resigned, as he wrote in 1992, unable in good conscience to bring anyone into such an organization or continue working with any sense of integrity. The way this period in John's life came to a close was one of the most painful and heartbreaking phases of his journey here. He had the highest hopes for what he envisioned was possible to increase awareness of what May had put together for an ever-widening audience of people in America and the world. Earlier this week, my dear friend Marty Schatz wrote Marilyn the following: "Though I am unable to attend the event commemorating John's life, I wanted to share a quote from a recent issue of the Monthly Review, which I think is very relevant to John. John's hope for a museum of hidden history was really a hope for a museum of true history. In this connection, consider the following from W.E.B. Du Bois. I remember once offering to an editor an article which began with a reference to the experience of the last century. Oh, he said, leave out the history and come to the present. I felt like going to him over 1,000 miles and taking him by the lapels and say, dear, dear jackass, don't you understand that the past is the present? That without what was, nothing is? That of the infinite dead, the living are but unimportant bits? In this present moment, it is vital to appreciate how similar John's goal of creating the Museum of Hidden History is to what he sought to manifest in the late 80s. Each of these projects expresses a recurring desire and purpose of his life. The Museum of Hidden and True History is now ever more vital to pursue manifesting. Marilyn urges all of you who understand this to explore with her the multitude of ways you can contribute to making it so. Since 1987, I have treasured John's friendship through the years. Among other gifts, it was John who introduced me to Fletcher Prouty at the end of 1988 while work at the MBRC was ramping up. In the end, this introduction resulted in my self-publishing Understanding Special Operations, the interview I conducted with Fletcher in May 1989. 25 years later, in a May 2013 email to a few friends, including John, I posed the question, who are the David Phillipses, the Richard Helmses, the James Angletons, Ted Shackleys, David Sanchez Moraleses, and William Harveys of today who execute the imperatives of this era's terror warriors? It seems that people who physically or psychologically murder other people are, in some elemental respects, walking dead themselves. John replied to me alone with the following, and this is inside your program on the first page. In an old and vivid dream, I want to write into a story. I was with a group of people trying to confront and catch a killer who had traveled over time, a sort of Jekyll and Hyde, Jack the Ripper character. In the dream, we were in the Victorian era London streets of fogs, carriages, and gas lamps, in a brick factory district, hiding in an alcove to see him go by in his hat and cape. Then we began to pursue him until he became aware of us, and some lit torches, and the chase was on. It led down an alley, brick wall building backs on one side, backyard fences and gates on the other. He stopped just as we were gaining on him and tried to insert a key in one of the wooden gates, but fumbled and cursed as he dropped the key, realizing we were then too close to escape. He then turned towards us, his face a grinning skull of evil, but also wide-eyed with fear of what our retribution would be. The others had only torchlight and no weapons. I stepped forward and looked directly into his face and eyes and removed something from a pouch on my belt. I unfolded it and held it up to his eyes. It was the skin of his human face, and I offered it back to him. This, I think, is symbolically how we nonviolently love those who do us evil. By not returning the violence and evil, we give them back their humanity if they are willing to take it. John's devotion to honoring and serving life's needs was an extraordinary boon to our single, fragile, and miraculously gifted human family. His understanding, sensitivity, brilliance, vulnerability, ironic and farcical sense of humor was a tonic to all who knew him. The light from the fire in his heart continues to illuminate life's love, and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire can truly light the world. Thank you.
Hi, my name is John Miller. Marilyn, thank you for loving my friend John. And thank you all for loving my friend John. I really do like the name John. I think personally that it should be something that people should remember. It has such a stellar way about it, you know. I think that John and the feminine forms of it, like Joanne, Joanna, those kinds of things, you should take that name, and if you know someone who's having a child in the near future, you might want to talk to them about that beautiful name, John or Joanna. Anyway, I'm from Wisconsin, and I spent a lot of time with John when we were young, driving him around here and there, living with him, housemate, and just being friends, like a lot of the people here. John was truly amazing to me and to so many of you, I'm sure. His intellect, I don't know how to put it. I swear if he had been interested in chess, IBM's Blue would still be in second place. But his interest was in mostly things political and people memorable. We used to play a game. We used to do this thing of open a dictionary anywhere, pick out a word and ask John what the word meant, and John would immediately tell you the dictionary definition of the word. It was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. But he could do the same thing with people. He knew people, Mother Jones maybe, you know, he'd tell you about Mother Jones, or he'd tell you about Russell Means, or he'd tell you about Mohandas Gandhi, or he'd tell you about Malcolm Shabazz, or he'd tell you about Martin Buber, or Allen Ginsberg, and you name it, Rosa Parks. He could tell you about anybody, and he could tell it to you so you knew them, so they were your friends. That was John. That was the way John was. And I really liked it, you know, that he made so much fun of things political. I once had an acquaintance who told me, and this is the truth, he told me, he said that in the Pentagon, there are more prayer groups than in most dioceses. And John's reaction to that was, is that more ominous for the military or for religion? So he liked the absurdity of politics. He liked the absurdity of a president who, as one of his acts, decided that he was going to relieve himself of any war crimes punishment before he would ever be indicted. He knew that there was a vice president that we had who did not have a beating heart. So those are things that John would say about some of the people that rule this country. But as a friend of John's, I got to know him in a lot of different ways. And I think his sense of the absurd was what I would like to leave you folks with. I'm going to show you something, and then I'll come back here to the mic and read all along the Watchtower, because I know we all feel sometimes like we're stuck inside a mobile with the Memphis Blues again. But I think that I'd like to show you this one thing. John used to love things like Laurel and Hardy, those kinds of things. And maybe a lot of you have seen that with John. He loved to laugh at that kind of absurdity. And I want to show you and teach you something that my friend John showed me. And you're all my friends too, because you're here. So let me show you this thing. It's an Abbott and Costello bit. And it's a sight thing. You have to clear off your laps, and you just sit. And Abbott and Costello called this, they named it, earsy, kneesy, nosy. And this is how it goes. You slap your hands on your knees, and you take this hand and put it on your nose, and this hand on your ear. Then you go back to your knees, and you switch hands so that you're like this the second time. And then you go back down, and you go like this. And you go back down, and you go like this. And after a while, you get a little faster at it, and you get a little faster at it, and you can even do a tune to it, like, Sweet Georgia Brown. Sweet Georgia Brown. My friend John taught that to me. I just taught it to you. For the rest of your lives, you will know this and think of John Judge. Yeah. All Along the Watchtower by Bob Dylan. There must be some way out of here, said the joker to the thief. There's too much confusion. I can't get no relief. Businessmen, they drink my wine. Plowmen dig my earth. None of them along the line know what any of it is worth. No reason to get excited, the thief he kindly spoke. There are many here among us who feel that life is but a joke. But you and I, we've been through that. And this is not our fate. So let us not talk falsely now. The hour is getting late. All along the watchtower, princes kept the view, while all the women came and went, barefoot servants too. Outside in the distance, a wildcat did growl. 2 riders were approaching. The wind began to howl. God bless you all.
Hi. My name is Joe Green, and I've been a part of the organization, the Coalition of Political Assassinations, the group that John led for 20 plus years. My first book, Dissenting Views, was dedicated in part to John for his mentorship to me and also his friendship. And I spent the last year working on a documentary that John is going to be in, along with several other people like Robert Groden and Cyril Wecht and Oliver Stone and Richard Belzer, so that'll be coming up pretty soon. I wanted to make this talk light and anecdotal and keeping in the spirit of celebration, and I can't really do that because, as you all know, John's life was spent in very serious things. He counseled war veterans, and he spoke to teenagers about the dangers of joining the military, and he investigated the dirty laundry of our intelligence agencies and the Pentagon and the murders that they commit, both foreign and domestic. John liked to say that he knew only one reason that you would build a 5-sided building facing south, and that was to raise the devil. So to get the sense of that, I'm going to have to talk about those kinds of things. I want to start by saying that first and foremost, like all of you, John was just my good friend. We used to talk about pretty ordinary stuff on the phone, and he sent emails about pretty ordinary things, and along with all the other stuff. One day we ended up talking for several hours about a girl he met on the internet. And can you imagine being on a website and getting matched up with John Judge? You know? Like, you're a 95% match with John Judge. Cool. And it turned out that Marilyn is pretty cool. And she's been wonderful and supportive and has done incredible stuff with the Hidden History Museum and just been a great support to John, and he was never happier than when he was talking about Marilyn. Now, my dad is a professor, and I grew up around academics, and he knew that. And so whenever I'd call or he'd call me, he would say, Dr. Green the Younger. You know, he bestowed on me an honorary doctorate. He was kind of like, as a political researcher, he was more like family to me. He's the only conspiracy theorist wherein I helped take off his shoes. You know, it was that type of situation. And I ended up helping COPA in various ways, putting on the conferences for about the last 10 years or so. I'm a recent entrance into John's life. And I saw how difficult it is to run something like that and how much stuff you have to put up with in order to do it. And he put up with more than I would have, frankly. You can tell by just the number and variety of people that are in here that he's a lot more than a conspiracy theorist, right? I mean, he's touched all these different areas. The line that follows all discussions of John probably forevermore is that thing that he said where he said, you can call me a conspiracy theorist if you call everybody else a coincidence theorist. You know, that was his favorite thing, and that's true. But the term conspiracy theorist is usually meant to designate a paranoid, someone out of touch with reality. And there was nobody more in touch with reality than John Judge. Like, it was that reality that forced him into action. He was a man guided by his conscience, and in the end, completely and irretrievably sane. Spending time with John was a process of perpetually having your mind blown apart. Those of us who know him around dinner and in the hallways would know that feeling well when somebody new would come up and, you know, hi, Mr. Judge, and they'd ask him a question. And he would explain that there were no suicides at Guyana, that Jim Jones was running a mind control experiment, and that the phrase drinking the Kool-Aid refers to something that never happened. It's a public myth. Or you might mention that none of the nuclear planes that went into the air in the wake of the Kennedy assassination had code books to make it impossible for the U.S. to start World War III in case some itchy general got the urge. And that was beyond the capacity of any CIA schlepper to cause that. Or John might explain how Mae Brussel had warned the family of Mary Jo Kopechne just weeks before Chappaquiddick that the same forces that had killed John Kennedy were out to kill their daughter. Or he might talk about how he had followed the newspaper clippings in the Watergate scandal to learn that Woodstein's version of that event was a fairy tale. John never said these things based on intuition or based on flimsy evidence. He did what he could to get the actual documents that our government produces and to scan the newspaper for information that slips onto page A13 when we're all distracted by what's on page A1. He used to tell audiences that the papers in the past carried more useful information than they do now, mostly in the comics and the society pages. Comics like Steve Cannon, he pointed out, often had a weird predictive ability to show where we were going to invade next. And indeed, the CIA, USAF covert operations against Laos during the Vietnam War were called the Steve Canyon Program, colloquially. Meanwhile, in the social pages, you could learn who was aligned with whom and in what capacity, the golden names of American aristocracy with long memories and dense bloodlines connecting to their British ancestors, those who occasionally deigned to party with the nouveau riche of oil stocks and computer barons. A conversation with John Judge was like listening to the best and the most entertaining teacher that you ever had. Also, unlike most political researchers, his research was 10% of his work, 20% of his work. It was like a program of projected empathy. Bertrand Russell, in a Free Man's Worship, spoke of all humanity being tied by a link of common doom. And there is that. But what motivated John was a link of common hope. When he honored the moment of silence for Kennedy and for Penn Jones on November 22nd, and he honored Kennedy's speech at American University every June 10th, he was acting from a place of hope. There are those external forces, the forces of power and wealth operating under the controlled systems of colonization, and there are the internal forces which seek to destroy from within everything that John stood for and tried to make real. He knew we're not likely to win. He was aware of all that, and he fought anyway, because what the hell else are we going to do? Join him? No. I'm not going to do that. Walter Benjamin once wrote that the angel of history flies backward with her hands over her face because she can't bear to witness the progress of destruction. John's life was a process of pulling away the angel's hands because we first have to see clearly before we can begin to repair the damage. John Judge was my friend, and he was my mentor, and I will miss him until the end. And in my remaining days, I will try to be 1% as valuable as he was to the human race. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's MJ Park. This is my husband, Jerry. First, I want to start with gratitude. Gratitude for Maryland, for John, and for being here today. We feel honored that we can be part of this service. For us, John's light is shining bright. Little Friends for Peace was started, I hate to date myself, but 30-some years ago as our response to violence. And I'm a former history teacher. I guess I'm not former, I'm still a history teacher, but I took myself out of the traditional classroom and said that I wanted to teach peace. And there wasn't an ad looking for a peace teacher. There still really isn't. But we have been teaching peace in a way that has given us a way to answer this violence that's out there. This morning, we spent with a group of peace kids, as we call them, right in the North Capitol area, and we planted a garden in honor of John. And we just left there and came. The kids were hands dirty and smiling faces. We didn't bring them with us, but we brought their love and their energy and their spirit. These are kids who circled up this morning, and they shared what brought them peace and unpeace. And what brought them peace was being with a group of young adults who came out of their daily life and interrupted the violence by being with the kids, saying, we care about you. We want to give you a different toolbox. And that's what I see John did for his whole life. He stood and he was the voice. He was the interrupter. And that's how we met him when we are parents of 5 boys. And I did not give birth for my kids to go and pick up a gun and to fight for our country. But I did give birth for them to be friends in community with other people. And so, John, I want to thank you for partnering with Jerry and I when we would go into high schools, and we are still doing that. And it is sad to hear that some of the low-income kids say to me, the only thing I can do is get pregnant and go to war and pick up a gun. That is sad. One of the girls this morning said what broke her peace is that someone got shot in her neighborhood last night. But today they were blooming because people were standing with them and caring about them and giving them another way to live life. And that's what Little Friends for Peace is all about. And Jerry's going to share a little bit on how he met John.
Oh, I just want to say that the work we do, we've just been learning that as we keep reminding ourselves to connect our minds with our hearts, things open up. We don't have to worry about controlling things when we connect our hearts and our minds. And so that's what we're trying to do with children, parents, and teachers. And we were given the gift of finding quotes from Winnie the Pooh that kept John human. So we're going to read a few that we picked up.
I love, as you listen to these, we know that this journey is a long road, and there are days and nights that we lose hope. And this has been so fun preparing for today. I have a smile on my face because Jerry and I were laughing reading some of these, but I never knew that John's favorite character, or one of his favorite characters, was Winnie the Pooh. So enjoy. A day spent with you is my favorite day, so today is my new favorite day.
You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think.
Let's begin by taking a smallish nap or two.
Some people care too much. I think it's called love.
If you live to be 100, I want to live to be 100 minus 1 day, so I never have to live without you.
Sometimes the smallest things take the most room in your heart.
A day without a friend is like a pot without a single drop of honey left inside.
If there ever comes a day when we can't be together, keep me in your heart. I'll stay there forever.
Piglet, how do you spell love? Pooh, you don't spell it, you feel it.
Nobody can be uncheered with a balloon.
I think we dream so we don't have to be apart so long. If we're in each other's dreams, we can be together all the time.
Always watch where you are going. Otherwise, you may step on a piece of the forest that was left out by mistake.
A little consideration, a little thought for others makes all the difference.
Love is taking a few steps backward, maybe even more, to give way to the happiness of the person you love.
It is more fun to talk with someone who doesn't use long, difficult words, but rather short, easy words like, "What about lunch?"
A day spent with you is my favorite day, so today is my new favorite day.
Let's begin by taking a smallish nap or two. So you can see that these are just filled with John. And I guess as I was putting them together, we know that joy and laughter and hope is so important for the journey. But on a note, as we planted the garden today for John, I guess I was thinking a lot about the seeds of hope and the seeds of peace. And my kids sometimes say, "Mom, you've been working for peace for a long time, and they're still fighting wars, and they're still, putting money into weapons." And I said, it's not about that. It's about changing hearts and filling people with love. And I know that John did that. He was always so calm and peaceful. I can remember Jerry on the phone with him saying, "Hey, we have another group of kids, and we want to enlighten them that there is another path." And John would say, "I'm there. and he found a way. And I know that we'll be putting a picture of him up in our Peace Room in DC, and as we go around and plant seeds, we're going to try to keep bringing into the awareness that there are many ways to solve a problem, and one of the best ways is to come to that peace table and get to know your person and the person you're struggling with, because you'll find there's more that you have in common. Thank you, John.
My name is Ben Murray, and I was John's college roommate for, I think, all of sophomore, junior, part of senior year. And I can give you the most obscure and unknown fact about John Judge. We were members of Young Republicans in 1966. It was under great pressure, and it involved a girl. Details later. I know many of us felt we had a special relationship with John. Perhaps some among us feel we had the special relationship with him. That's the kind of guy he was. You just felt that way when you knew him. We've heard a lot about John, the public man, a little bit about the early John, but I'd like to close, at least as the last of the formal speakers, with a few moments about youth and friendship, and maybe a little bit about the soil from which John grew and how he became the man that we mourn today. I met John 49 years ago as I was walking away from a football stadium. No, he wasn't at the game. I was with a few other people, and John was standing on a street corner, and he just started talking to us. Big surprise there. And he didn't stop. And then we were like, who the hell is this? And he started following us down the street. And we ended up in a restaurant where we ate dinner. I paid. Early learning there, two things. He always had a tremendous appetite, and he never paid for dinner. I'll give you a good example. We're out eating Chinese one night. A few years had gone by. Patty, I think you were there with us that night. We eat dinner. Of course, I don't have any money. So, fine. We go out, we're walking down the street, and we pass a bookstore. So he wants to go in. So in we go, and the next thing I see, he's at the cash register with this giant book of fairy tales. And I'm like, John, what the hell? You said you didn't have any money. And he's like, well, I didn't have money for food. I had money for a book. That was John. Who was that 17-year-old kid on a street corner? His uniform of the day was a black turtleneck, surfer's cross, and this kind of wavy, jet black, slick back pompadour. He was girl crazy like everybody else. And like many of us, college was a refuge from our strange families and weird homes and very odd relations. He started making friends for the first time in his life. He found people who really cared about him. And they just wanted to be with him. And he worked hard all his life to keep that spirit going. He kept us all connected. We've had a little email tag. Who's going to keep us connected now? Nobody's volunteering for the job. There were things he could do that would drive you completely crazy. There has never been a more self-obsessed, narcissistic, socially cute, clueless person in the world. Yes, he could dance, and he never missed the opportunity. And even as he got bigger as the years went by, and in college he weighed 165 pounds, and even then we called him Big Boy. But as the years went by, he never lost that love of dance or that sense of rhythm. He loved Motown. He devoured Zap comics and everything with R. Crumb. He could memorize enormous excerpts from books, speeches, and of course, he liked to recite them back to you. I'm glad Mr. Gibran made it here today, because it was a famous thing of John's that in the middle of the night he would just start reading to people. If he got tired, he would hand you the book and try to get you to read to him. Yes, he could recite Jabberwocky from memory. I think he might have been able to do it backwards. He could do anything by Lewis Carroll. He was a friend of Albion Moonlight. He knew Tolkien and Frodo and Bilbo and the whole gang decades before the wider culture. He liked Richard and Mimi Farina. He loved folk music, but he loved the Grateful Dead and rock music as well. He was perfectly willing, and regardless of whether you agreed or not, he was happy to parse the words of Dylan songs all night long. Gandhi and Merton and King were his heroes as a 17-year-old. Words defined the young John, even as they did to the end of his days. He was never without a book in his hands. One of my best pictures of him is to see him in the chair that was kind of a easy chair, rocking chair, and he would usually fall asleep there at night, fully dressed, with a book open on his stomach. Sometimes I'd wake up at 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. The chair might have been pulled a little closer to my bed, and he's reading out loud. And when your eye cracks, he goes, "Oh, you're awake. Let me read this to you. It is great." And he could talk. And when you talk to John, did you ever have that experience or sense that the conversation never ends? No, I don't mean just like in the moment, but we were at a party in like 74, and we're just talking, and we were trying to remember the names of those 2 goofy cops from New York who worked for the committee to re-elect. Couldn't come up with them. Whatever, the party went on, we got interrupted, we're gone. I don't see him for 5 years. Hello, how you been, that kind of thing. Immediately he says, "Caulfield and Ulazowitz." I'm thinking like, who the hell, what is he talking about? And then I realize he's just picked up the conversation right where we left it off. He was a thinker first, but also a man of action. On campus, he was a leader in the campaign to end mandatory ROTC. I got out of it because I had bad feet. He argued and marched against the war and in support of civil rights and equal justice. When Martin Luther King was killed, John made a sign. It said, "The King of Love is dead," and he walked over by himself out in front of the student union, and he just stood there. And then slowly, nothing more, he just stood there. But one by one, people started to join him and just stood silently holding the vigil. He was a genius, no question of that. He was generous with his time and his support and his money, even though it was a rare occasion that he had one. He often borrowed it from you and then gave it to somebody else. He was always ready for an adventure. Didn't matter the time of day. If Bill or John or Rick or myself or anybody dreamed up some idea, the Hollywood Drive-In, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, he's like, boom, out the door, ready to go. He was the smartest guy you'll probably ever likely to meet. If he had been into computers and technology, he would have died a billionaire. Sorry about that, Marilyn. He did leave you his estate. He loved his country, though he despised the actions of those who thought democracy was something for sale or barter. He became one of the first draft counselors. I was one of his first clients. I have a felony conviction, but he got better. And then he moved on and he became an advocate for veterans and worked with the Vietnam veterans against the war. And finally, he moved on to high school kids, and a couple people have referenced that just in recent times here in DC. But I can remember it must have been like 1973. How he did it, I don't know, but he arranged to speak to some high school class, and of course he needed a ride, and there would be lunch afterwards. And we got as far as the hallway walking towards the office when the security guard interrupted us with something like, "Where in the hell do you boys think you're going?" And we never made it. But he got better at that too. Despite injustice and inequality around him, he was never mean-spirited, never sought credit, never sought personal reward, didn't crave recognition, didn't need to be in the newspapers, preferred not to be, actually. His focus was always on getting the job done. We had an experience that stuck with us through all the years. I last saw him in Dallas last November, and within minutes of sitting down with him, we were talking about this incident. We were freshmen in college. I'd only known him for not even 2 months. Somehow we'd become co-chairs of the education committee of the student union, which we didn't know what it did, and it didn't do much. The main thing we were noteworthy for was that we wrote a letter to Pope Paul VI demanding that he come to our Catholic university to defend his encyclical on birth control. We didn't hear from the Vatican, but since we had copied all the local church officials, we did hear back. But anyways, there we were. We come to the November meeting, and there's 2 guys already in the meeting room, student union, and they have a bunch of cupcakes in front of them on a table. And they're looking down at 2 of them, and each of the candles each cupcake has 2 candles on it. And just as we were coming in, these guys are like, "Yeah," and they blow the candles out. And we're like, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" And they said, "Oh, it's the 2nd anniversary of Kennedy," says the first one. And then the other one says some foolishness like, "Yeah, it's 2 years since we got our country back," or something like that. John was appalled and just outraged. And he started doing that John thing when he gets nervous, like, "Oh, we gotta get out of here. We ain't gonna be part of this. We gotta go." Now, he was already a pacifist. I wasn't. So he had his hand on my wrist, and he's kind of leading me away. And I probably went with him about 3 steps, and I turned around and kind of just one sweep of my arm flung the cupcakes all over the place, and I said something intelligent like, "Fuck you guys." He never forgot that. He started giving me these Gandhi books. But we both always looked at it as this formative kind of moment where, what we see now in this just kind of spiteful, mean-spirited public discourse that we live with. And there it was when we were 17 years old. If I close my eyes, I can see him as a child, studious, quiet, always listening, forever watching everything. He was a lonely, only child, living in a world mostly of his own design, though he was doted on by his parents. That showed. But he was always torn by the strange anomaly that his mother was a high official in Pentagon manpower planning, and he was spending his days trying to subvert the Pentagon. I can also see young John, the healthy person, young, so full of energy, optimistic, so many days ahead, his future unlimited, always laughing with life and at life, always looking forward. I watched him struggle for a purpose, a way to channel his energy and his ideas. And slowly, as the months and then years went by step, the work revealed itself to him. I understood the pain that he felt, that all of us, or almost all of us, felt at the death of a president. And I experienced his visceral outrage at watching two right-wing idiots celebrating the death of John Kennedy. I can still remember listening to him reading Lane and Epstein and other early dissenters, and poring over the Warren Report, and later walking around in the shadows of Watergate, always struggling with the unanswered questions, mystified by the strange vagueness and distressed by the obvious cover-ups. And there his life work at 20 and 21 and 22, slowly beginning to take shape and form. John lived his life with great intensity, and for far longer than those of us who knew of his early health issues ever thought would be possible. He was privileged, and he knew it, that he got to live the life he wanted and do the work that he wanted to do all the days of his adult life. Has anyone in this room been so lucky? In the preliminary autopsy, the medical examiner said he had a big heart, more than twice its expected size. When I heard that, I thought, a big heart. So Mr. Medical Examiner, tell me one damn thing that I don't know. We'll miss his fountain of ideas and his torrent of thoughts, his insights and his obscure connections, his speculations and his facts, his conjectures and his certainties, and even his doubts. In the aftermath of his stroke and death, someone wrote to me suggesting that perhaps it was a blessing, that John never would have wanted to live that way. I know there's some truth there. There is. But I also know that he loved life. He was devoted to his work. He adored Marilyn. And he was thriving in their love. He was like a little kid telling me about her in Dallas. I also know that he was struggling to recover. And in that struggle, he had the courage to take his chances on a very uncertain outcome. It was a delight to learn how much the hospital staff at George Washington appreciated his sweet nature. No surprise. Of course they would. I wasn't there, but I know him, in that I know that even as he struggled for words and was suffering and feeling lost and adrift in a strange and frightening place, that he continued to speak with those expressive eyes and that twinkling smile and that kind and gentle spirit. In all his years of research and study, not every suspicion he followed was warranted. Not every investigation proved fruitful, nor every idea correct. But on the big picture of life in our times, he was right far more than he was wrong. I don't know exactly what happened in Dallas 50 years ago, but I know it was something terrible. It was more than the death of a president. It was a turning away from a democratic pathway. He understood that at an early age, and he gave his life over to ensuring that we would understand it as well. That cause will go on, that work will continue. And I have to believe in the end that that truth is not going to be denied. I'm reminded today of Daniel Moynihan famously speaking to a reporter in the aftermath of President Kennedy's death. He made a comment that I think is particularly apt today. Reflecting on the loss of the president, he said, We'll laugh again one day, but we'll never be young again. And I think how powerfully that resonates. So let me close by saying that while we were both faithful non-believers, going all the way back to graduation day 1969, sitting next to each other in that crumbly old field house, the odd spectacle of two self-declared atheists getting their degrees in theology. We did not get invited to the department party. But I can't deny today that part of me hopes that the Hindus have it right with a belief in reincarnation and a circle of life. Because if they are, there is some dictator, some militarist, some industrialist son of a bitch somewhere around this globe who's just waiting and about to suffer an acute attack of political indigestion. When John starts cranking up the questions in whatever language he's speaking now and shoving this truth up his ass, albeit in his uniquely friendly and pacifistic manner. In the meantime, may our friend John rest in peace. Thank you.
going to wake you up for this next part. You're all going to have to participate. So over here, and maybe take part in one of John's favorite songs.
This is audience participation. You can all sing along and clap to John Lennon's Give Peace a Chance. One, two, three, four. Everybody's talking about annexation, retaliation, domination, fabrication, assassination, machination, complication, compensation, castigation, immigration, regulation, integration. Hey, all we are saying is give peace a chance. All we are saying is give peace a chance. Hey, everybody's talking about droning, owning, loaning, stoning, phoning, spying, lying, flying, dying, trying, buying, crying. Hey, all we are saying is give peace a chance. All we are saying is give peace a chance. Hey, everybody's talking about terrorism, scarism, fearism, queerism, racism, sexism, classism, clanism, thisism, thatism, ism. Hey, all we are saying is give peace a chance. All we are saying is give peace a chance. Hey, everybody's talking about CIA, JFK, RFK, MLK, Malcolm X, KKK, NRA, NSA, FDA, LBJ, runaway CIA, go away. Hey, all we are saying is give peace a chance. All we are saying is give peace a chance. Hey, everybody's talking about Chelsea Manning, Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, Thomas Drake, Carrie Aku. Hey, all we are saying is give peace a chance. All we are saying is give peace a chance. Keep going. All we are saying is give peace a chance. All we are saying is give peace a chance. Good job.
Thank you all. That was beautiful. This is going to end our formal part of the program, but please don't leave. But I wanted to mention one last thing before we broke away. I was listening to an interview that John did about 2005 on Guns and Butter radio show, and he's talking about the violence that he spent his life researching. And John noted that, referring to the violence, he said it demoralizes people, it kills hope, but it doesn't last forever, and people rise again to ask these questions and continue these investigations. So I think for us, that's what our job is here, is to facilitate that work, the work that you've all been doing with John, the stuff that you're going to keep doing without him. And I wanted to mention that we are trying to preserve his books, his writings, his papers. He tried to start a museum of hidden history before he died. Whether that happens or not, but we do want to move forward, and we want to preserve his books, preserve all the important work that he had done. And we'd love for your support. If you would want to get involved in the Museum of Hidden History project, please speak to me, speak to Marilyn, and we'll move forward. But until then, thank you all very much. This has been a really spectacular event. I really thank you all for coming, but we haven't done yet, so please stick around. There'll be a reception next door. You go out that door, take a right, you'll find it right away. So please spend some time, share some memories, have something to eat, raise a toast. Thank you.